I'm the Communications Director with Public Health Advocates, and I am joined with a team, both staff, partners, and our funder today. So we're just overjoyed that all of you could join us as we officially launch All Children Thrive California. We have some exciting information to share with you, and you'll be hearing more about that in the next few minutes. But we also want to hear about the great work that's happening in your communities across the state. Just a few things that I wanted to share, some brief details as we get through the program. To limit background noise, we'll be muting all participants. We'll have a discussion period and ask that you please click on the raise hand button so that we can unmute you. We also want to encourage you to leave comments throughout the discussion in the chat. So please make sure you're doing that. If we're experiencing technical difficulties, we might ask that participants turn their camera off. And we are recording today's presentation, so we want to make sure that we get that back to you in an email and share that after the launch. I now want to take a moment to introduce the speaker who will be giving a brief welcome on behalf of our funder. Jeffrey Rosenhall has been with the California Department of Public Health since 2004, working in injury and violence prevention, active transportation, obesity prevention, cardiovascular, and diabetes program areas. His professional passion is in injury and violence prevention, where he works as a section chief, supporting and supervising the violence and injury prevention and active transportation program teams. So I want to have everybody just please help me welcome Mr. Rosenhall. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good morning. Can you hear me okay, Brandy?
Yep, perfect.
Well, appreciate the introduction. We want to get to the All Children Thrive this morning. Welcome to all of you. As Brandy said, I'm Jeffrey Rosenhall. I work with the California Department of Public Health at our Injury and Violence Prevention branch, and I serve as the chief of a section there. I'm honored to be welcoming you all to the All Children Thrive California ACT California virtual launch today, and I wanted to thank the ACT California team for this opportunity and all the work that they've put into this project and today. California Department of Public Health Injury and Violence Prevention Branch has a long history of utilizing primary prevention approaches to address multiple forms of violence, including domestic violence, teen dating violence, sexual violence, adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, and child maltreatment. CDPH's programs are informed by and supported by the guidance of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, who has identified violence as a serious public health problem and is committed to stopping violence before it occurs. This further strengthens and supports our branch's program efforts to address violence through policy systems and environmental change strategies and support for common protective factors in order for all California families and children to thrive. We are honored and proud to include the ACT California project under the umbrella of projects that are supported by CDPH. At this critical moment when so many drivers of childhood trauma, such as racism and economic insecurity, have been laid bare by the ongoing pandemic and civil protests against excessive use of force, ACT California provides communities with a launch pad to learn about action and change that is directed and defined by the community. The ACT California initiative offers municipalities the opportunity to address the upstream social determinants of health through a public health approach that prevents childhood adversity, mitigates its effects, and strengthens individuals, families, and communities. CDPH is thrilled to be supporting the ACT California program to engage cities in strategies to reduce the prevalence of ACEs and build on a national ACT California initiative that has prioritized children's health in more than a dozen U.S. cities. CDPH looks forward to continuing to support the ACT California in their work as they continue to undertake and implement this project that has enormous promise for improving lives across the state and in all California's children. We sincerely appreciate the work of community partners, public health advocates, University of California, Los Angeles, and the many, many stakeholders who guide and support the work. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today and to support the ACT California virtual launch. Next, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Pojan Kofer, who serves as the Senior Director of Policy at Public Health Advocates. Dr. Kofer is an epidemiologist who oversees the state policy efforts and the ACT California Local Trauma Policy Initiative. Her professional interest is in addressing emerging and persistent public health challenges through research and policy. Her work primarily focuses on metabolic disease prevention, restorative justice, and ACEs. She previously served as the Director of State Policy and Research for Public Health Advocates. Prior to joining PHA, she led the Preconception Health Initiative for the California Department of Public Health. Pojan received a bachelor's degree in chemistry and women's studies from Spelman College, Her public health training was at the University of Michigan School of Public Health, where she earned a master's degree in public health and a doctorate in epidemiology. She is an alumna of the California Epidemiologic Investigation Service, CAL-EIS, and the Nehemiah Emerging Leaders Program. Rosen is deeply committed to civic engagement, having served in various capacities on local boards, committees, and commissions, including the Active Transportation Commission, Mayor's Commission on Climate Change, Sheriff's Outreach Community Advisory Board, Board of Directors for Girl Scouts, Heart of Central California, and chairing the new City of Sacramento's Measure U Community Oversight Commission. For her professional contributions and community participation, she was awarded the Young Professional of the Year Award by the Sacramento Urban League, the Exceptional Woman of Color Award by the Sacramento Cultural Hub, and the 40 Under 40 Award by the Sacramento Business Journal. With that, please join me this morning in welcoming Dr. Kofer.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey. I really appreciate that very warm introduction, and I'm really pleased to be here. I see that we have 97 participants this morning, and so we're really excited to share with you a little more information about the All Children Thrive initiative. So, what is All Children Thrive? All Children Thrive is the brainchild of several collaborators who were looking and thinking about how do we, build these networks of people across the state to work together to really think about systems change when it comes to child well-being. One of the challenges is that there's a lot of great work that's happening throughout the state, but it's often not brought together in a way where people can learn from one another and be able to benefit from the things that we've already learned in other places that might work, and really have a platform to be able to collaborate, but also to be able to co-design solutions with residents and youth and city officials and community leaders who understand exactly what's happening on the ground and therefore should be in charge of the ways in which we engage in this kind of work to transform systems. And the ultimate goal of this really is to heal those adversities that are affecting California's children today, and also to help transform the future so that we're not having the same conversations and tackling the same problems. We often like to think about this as we'd like in the future to have new problems because we've solved the ones that we're addressing right now. And we know that the people power of bringing people together to transform those systems and what allows that to happen. So some of the challenges, that we're facing are that there are complex systems at play that shape where we live and play and learn and grow. And the evidence that we have is that some of these systems really are not meeting the needs of far too many of our children. Our young people are left with unresolved traumas, and these traumas don't just happen in their childhood and then suddenly resolve themselves, but they often can last a lifetime if we don't intervene in that period in between. And so the result of that, if we don't intervene, and if we don't find ways to be able to address it, is that those children often have poorer health, they have limited educational and job opportunities, and just fewer opportunities in general to be able to meet their overall potential and to be able to succeed in achieving their wellness. And that success is not something that is boxed in or is prescriptive. It's about really achieving the overall health and wellness of what they'd like to be able to achieve for their lives in a way that really responds to their talents and their treasures and their dreams for themselves. So when we think about, what's happening in terms of our communities, one of the major challenges that's facing us is structural racism and trauma. And we would be remiss if we didn't start there and recognize that, if we look at the history of our country and even the state of California, it's rooted in this as an overarching framework. And this is not the way, if we think about the roots or the foundation of a structure, this is not what you'd want it to be founded on if you want to flourish and you want people to be at their best. And so if we think about this from, as a historical perspective, structural racism is woven into the DNA of this nation and also this state. In particular, if we think about, how the country got started with the genocide of the indigenous people, thinking about the policies and practices that were in place that subjugated one group of people and stole and brought here to work for free another group, and the policies that were passed to be able to reinforce those systems throughout. And even after the period of Reconstruction, Jim Crow then was put into place. And so we've had over time time these policies that have just reinforced who is allowed to be American, who is allowed to be part of our society, and who is allowed full participation in the quest to be able to thrive and to be able to have their wellness needs met. And we see this continue on well into the 20th century and certainly the 21st century when we think about the California Land Act and the way that redlining created wealth or took wealth away from certain communities, and then how that was layered on top of geographic ways that policy was implemented through mass incarceration and the war on drugs. And so when we think about these, we have to understand that this is woven into all of the policies and practices that we engage in, even ones that seem sometimes as if they're divorced from these very practices. And even when these policies go away, their impact is lasting because they have been woven into the foundation. And a house built on a rocky foundation is hard to be level and certainly to be sound structurally. So that brings us to our current realities, right? And right now, obviously, you know, the word of the year is probably going to be COVID-19 because it's a word that didn't exist before February 11th and now dominates our way of thinking and our ways of being and has really disrupted life as we know it. And there are two realities when we think about this. And the first is that, you know, COVID is negatively impacting children, particularly those that are most vulnerable. I often describe this as the Titanic effect. And the Titanic, for those of you who may not be familiar, was a ship that sank on its maiden voyage over 100 years ago. And what's really interesting about using that analogy is that people on the Titanic, you know, the ship sank. And so everybody was in a sinking ship. And I'm sure we've all said this year, we're in this together. But we recognize that even among the Titanic, if you were a first-class passenger, you were far more likely to survive than if you were a third-class passenger. And if you were a first-class woman or child, you were even more likely to survive than a first-class man or certainly a third-class man, woman, or child. And so that's where our reality also intersects with, you know, affected individuals, you know, in communities are not experiencing this equally. It's exacerbated by those pre-existing inequities. But our second reality here is that, you know, children and families are living amidst one of the biggest racial uproars in recent history. So that was the existing context. And children of color have been re-traumatized by witnessing the constant police brutality against Black and Indigenous and other people of color. So when we think about the sources of childhood trauma, they are quite broad and they come in different types. If we think about direct trauma, that's that trauma that is experienced individually by someone, whether it's physical, sexual, and emotional abuse and neglect, or witnessing domestic violence, or potentially, you know, parental drug abuse or mental illness, or a loss of a caregiver from death or divorce or imprisonment. And that is certainly important, but it's layered on top of what's happening outside of that person's individual household or their individual experience. There's also community trauma and the ways in which witnessing police brutality or witnessing violence or threats or having a lack of safe housing or community disinvestment also is traumatizing to communities. And then when we layer that on top of the broader social factors that are at play, especially when it comes to generational trauma, this is where we start talking about the structural racism and the ways that concentrated poverty, not sort of moral failing of being in poverty, but the actual concentration of poverty as a policy and as a power dynamic is really important in shaping the lives of people and creating trauma. Similarly to the lack of social support overall and forced displacement of communities. And so when we think about how all of these things come together and then think about our children, this is what they're experiencing. Even the youngest of them is a complex interplay of these various factors. And so it's not enough to just know what's happening. We also have to be really clear about what impact that has. I'm sure many people on this webinar are familiar with the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, which was done now over 20 years ago and is certainly layered on top of what we already knew about some of these systems in terms of the ways in which they impact our health and behavior. But this was one of the first times that we were able to document what this cluster of risk factors, what impact that has on our behavior, physical, and mental health outcomes. And what we see is that it's associated with a whole host of outcomes that previously we had not made a direct connection between, including things that may be outside of the wheelhouse of what you might expect in terms of things like diabetes or severe obesity or chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder or even broken bones. And so when we look at that and the totality of the way that trauma impacts us is in a loss of time, that our life expectancy is shortened by this as well, that these things that happen during these critical periods early in our lives have a lasting impact, including how long we even are here on this planet if we don't intervene to be able to provide buffering and possibly even provide prevention in the first place of experiencing some of these traumas. Because we shouldn't see them as intractable or inevitable, we should see them as preventable. And so the symptoms of those community traumas, right, are the ways that, people, places, and equitable opportunities sort of interact. And so if we think about the socio-cultural environment, people often end up being disconnected from the very networks that we need for our own health and wellness. And that is challenging because as social creatures, even the introverts among us, we need each other. But that disconnection can take place when trauma has eroded trust and separated people from the things that they need. There's also, the dislocating social norms and how those are amplified, and also having a low sense of collective political and social efficacy, which is essentially saying, the sort of checking out of systems because they have historically not worked, and you learn to work around them and not to be integrated into them because of the way in which they operate. When we think about place, it's those deteriorated environments that are unhealthy and can be dangerous, and the ways in which that shapes the outcomes that people are experiencing. And then, of course, when we think about the symptoms, we also have equitable opportunities. And so that's where the policies create intergenerational poverty, long-term unemployment, the relocation of businesses or jobs, or even the degradation of them, which leads to limited employment and often just divestment from important communities. So when we think about the strategies to address this, we have to think about healing as an overall approach that happens among people within a place and within equitable opportunity. And it involves a lot of different systems and a multi-sector approach in terms of how we could address this community trauma in a way that isn't just a one-off, but actually has long-lasting implications. And so All Children Thrive has taken this challenge on and has identified some community action areas based on listening to what communities are concerned about and what their aspirations are. And what we've come to are essentially 6 community action areas that are incredibly important. One being creative protective environments, another one is strengthening economic supports, promoting healthy child development, access to safe and stable housing, public safety from a public health perspective, so goal-oriented as opposed to function-oriented, and youth development and civic engagement. And those come together to form a framework of the things that we could work on together within communities, where some communities have done these things very well and are in essentially punching above their weight in terms of the ways in which they've been able to address some, and that other cities could learn from those cities as well, and also being able to identify what are some of the goals and what are some of the policy strategies and what are some of the ways that communities can work together to be able to address these different community action areas. So the steps for All Children Thrive are to, first and foremost, engage communities across the state to participate. And so this is the first of many conversations that we're going to be having with community members around what this is and how you can get involved. And then the second one is to help communities assess their data and understand the root causes of child and community adversity. So again, this is a community-led initiative where we serve as the partner who is going to help along the way with the convening and with the resources needed, but it's ultimately community-led in terms of setting the direction, setting goals, designing the roadmap for success, and adopting the plans for action. So this is just a bolstering of those existing resources and local leadership that exists within our California communities. And then throughout the California AXIA network, we want to be able to have communities that learn together and develop their best practices for transformative change. So that we're not a one-off and trying to constantly invent on our own, but we're benefiting from the collective brain power and collective people power across this great state. So when we think about this, practically speaking, what might this look like? And so our first community action area of promoting healthy child development, this could look like improving the built environment. This can look like addressing gun violence. This can look like healthy food access and complete streets, and some of the ways in which we're able to invest from an early age in healthy child development, ways that we haven't currently that can be disruptive to the process of creating community trauma. When we think about our second community action area, which is creating protective environments, this could be involved in, this could include things like restorative justice, and also thinking about the ways in which we engage our communities that have been traumatized, so that there's a way to restore not only trust, but also promote healing among our communities, which is often left out of the conversation when we think about protective environments. So this goes beyond just thinking about the aspects of our built environment, but also the ways in which our communities interact with one another. Our third community action area is youth development and civic engagement. And this can involve things like, involving youth, having youth have a seat at the table for the decisions that are happening within their cities, formally including their voices, and then actually listening to them. There's a resolution in one of the cities that we're beginning to work with that says, "Nothing about us without us." And that's a really important adage that we see as important as we're thinking about how do we engage in this work, and how do we make sure that the policies around youth actually involve youth voices, and that we're seeding that pipeline for great leadership to come. And then when we look at community action area number 4, which is strengthening economic supports for children and families, certainly as we're thinking about the COVID pandemic, there are ways that we can help to support families that include things like making sure that people have enough money during this time when businesses have been shuttered, making sure that they're not going to be evicted from their homes, and what it looks like even when some of those eviction protections end, to make sure that we're not just delaying the inevitable eviction of people who have accumulated great debt in the time when they were unable to pay for their housing. So those are some of the ways in which we can help to stabilize our families and communities by strengthening the economic supports. And then when we look at safe and affordable housing, that certainly falls into the economic development as well. But thinking about what are the ways that we can protect not only the ability to have affordable housing, but also making sure that it's safe housing. And so what does that look like in terms of the policies and practices in place that would allow, that would make sure that young people where they are living are free from harassment, have access to green spaces, or not living in places that have lead and other things like that are really challenging to our overall health and well-being. And so when we think about why you should join ACT, really, it's because, as the song says, our children are the future. And so we want you to be part of this movement, in part because there is a great amount of momentum involved when you're bringing people together. We're seeing that, literally on the streets right now, people coming out and articulating what they'd like to see for their communities. And we should certainly take advantage of that momentum to be able to bolster and unify, other work that's already happening within cities, and actually take advantage of the fact that we have people who are interested in visioning for the future and making sure that we're leading with that charge and with those voices in mind. We should, it also offers an opportunity to leverage the funding opportunities that both we have as well as the funding opportunities that already exist. All Children Thrive is funded by the Mental Health Services Act. And so that's a permanent, revenue source that exists for our communities to be able to fund work like this. And part of it has been set aside for things like prevention and early intervention and innovation. And so this is a great opportunity to be able to leverage those funding opportunities. Similarly, Prop 64, which is the Adult Use of Marijuana Act, has the opportunity to be able to provide funding as well, in particular through the Youth Fund. And so those are funding opportunities that could partner with the priorities that are set through All Children Thrive. But also this broadens civic engagement. One of the powerful things about movements like participatory budgeting is the idea of bringing more people together to be able to make decisions, and recognizing that we are so much more powerful when we have more people engaged, and when we have that collective brain trust and people power that is bolstering that. And certainly then also strengthening effective community outreach. So it's not enough to just, post a few flyers around town and say, hey, this thing is happening, or hey, we want to listen, but it's the idea of getting people involved and benefiting not only from just their ideas to then shape what happens, but also from their energy and from their wisdom to be able to shape the implementation and really have that exist throughout the process of community engagement. So we have been launching this for a while, and I really just want to say a big thank you to our teams, that are spread across the state. And so we have two fully onboarded cities already, Fresno and Stockton. And I wanted to just share a little bit with you about the community action areas that they have chosen for themselves. Fresno has chosen healthy child and youth development. They're also working on mental health and wellness support as how they want to think about healthy child and youth development, and racial equity. And that's the lens that they're taking and thinking about what policies and practices they want to put together as their specific team. In Stockton, they've chosen mental health and wellness and programs for children and youth as part of that healthy child development. And so we're really excited about what's coming next for both of these cities. And as we think about that, we have some cities that are in the process of joining as well. Ukiah and Richmond and Maywood and Huntington Park and Santa Paula and Modesto, East Palo Alto, Contra Costa County. And I think we also have some folks even on the line here who've been part of the national All Children Thrive movement from Long Beach and Pasadena that have similarly been working on this. And we're really excited about what a learning community can look like with all of these cities who are interested in joining and are at various stages of development of their plans and in implementing those and rethinking and even reevaluating some of the work that's already been successful, and how that within a city can be bolstered and expanded to be able to serve more parts of the community. So I'm sure the question that's on everyone's minds now is like, Flo, that sounds kind of interesting. Where do I go next? What does participation look like? I'm already up to my ears in work that I'm doing now. Do I really have the ability to be able to do this? And there is an adage that I really love, which is that many hands make light work. And so the goal here is for this to be a team effort. And in order to be able to participate in All Children Thrive, we actually are requiring that cities that are really interested actually bring together more than just yourselves. We don't want you to be an island on your own. And so the first step is to be willing to establish a core team that has some residents from your community, that has some city officials and staff, and that also has some community-based representatives from organizations that advocate or create policy for child well-being. And the goal of that is to be able to bring together some diverse perspectives to be able to work together in thinking about how to engage the community, and also to be able to define an action area. And so then you'd be assigned an ACT coach to help define what that action area would look like for you. And then you'd expand your core team to what we're calling a design team that has a broad representation of youth and community residents and organizations that support child well-being, so that you now have this group of people who are coming together for this joint purpose, who are learning from one another, and who are bringing all of their energy and talents to the table. And then, of course, the learning community is a key function of all of this. As you're working within your core team and your design team within your city, you're also part of a broader learning community of other cities that are working very similarly. And you'll be in both teaching others what's happening in your city, as well as learning from those other cities and troubleshooting along the way, so that there's an iterative process where we're learning from one another and we're actually able to provide real-time evaluation and redirect of things that maybe aren't working, or doubling down on things that are working really well. And so that's part of what participation would look like. There also is an opportunity for established core teams to be able to have some funding, and that funding can support both staff time to be able to facilitate this process with your core or design team, as well as to be able to host functions, whether virtual or hopefully one day in person, as well as to provide for other material support for the work that's happening within the community. And so another key feature of this that is sort of part of your participation in All Children Thrive is the youth design team. So we think it's really important that youth are integrated into the primary design team, but also that they have spaces that are specifically designed around them to be able to talk through issues and to be able to ensure that their voices are heard. And so those are specifically curated with them in mind. And each city that has a design team will have a youth design team to inform the issues that should be addressed and to create a leadership pipeline to better understand and promote policy changes so that in the words of our title, all children actually can thrive. So with that said, I'd like to turn this over now for some questions to my colleague at UCLA, Dr. Mimi Choi, who's with the UCLA Center for Healthier Children, Families, and Communities. And we'd really like to open this up now as an opportunity for you to ask us more questions about All Children Thrive, and so that we can make sure that you understand exactly what we're doing here and that we're meeting all of your needs so that you can get on board and really join us. Because of course, we're going to end this with the ask of please consider being an All Children Thrive city. We would love to have you, and we're really looking forward to partnering with as many of you as we can.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thanks, Flo. I just wanted to also echo how exciting it is that we have over 100 folks from all over California on this call this morning, and it's been wonderful to see your energy and your thoughts. And I really appreciate and want to take time to recognize all of the fires that are burning in our state right now. That is real and another trauma that many of our communities are incurring. And I think it's all the more important why we all do need to work now to help all children thrive. Just before we start launching into questions and hearing from you, I wanted to lay out some ground rules just so we can have some structure. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. It would be great if you could also include your name and the city that you're from, and then our moderators will help call on you. And if you feel comfortable, unmute yourself, introduce yourself with your name, where you're from, and go ahead and ask us your question. So go ahead. Any questions specifically about All Children Thrive, either logistics or bigger picture wise? Great, I see some questions coming through. So I'm gonna take Brian's question first. Brian, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
I sure will.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. First of all, good morning to everyone. And just wondering, as we operate in a relatively close-knit community within Sonoma County, not everyone that we have connections to or have the ability to form a core team is inherently in the exact same city. Is the city title designation or a small geographic area sufficient, I guess is my technical question.
Sure, that's a great question. This initiative started out with the idea that we would be based in cities, but working with many communities, we've learned that some communities don't necessarily follow traditional city boundaries. So if that is a situation that applies to the community that you're working with, that would be definitely something that's flexible in the eyes of our initiative. I also see a question from Jennifer about the organizations that are funding this effort. And as Flo mentioned, right now it's really, go ahead, Flo. Oh, sorry, I saw you lean forward. The majority of the funding for this effort is from MHSA dollars, so the Mental Health Service Act. All right, everyone is asking really great questions. So Catherine, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question and let us know where you're from?
Sure. I'm from Ventura County. I am the executive director for a nonprofit. We contract with Ventura County Behavioral Health, County Office of Ed, and several school districts to do youth engagement and advocacy through drug and alcohol prevention funds. And I'm wondering, can we join and then be involved in helping recruit people from our cities, or is it just cities that just sign up to be participants?
Yeah, that's a great question. We definitely want your people power and your resources and networks to help with us too. So if you already have groups within the cities that you work with that are identified, that's one way to enter it. Or you can also reach out to us. We'll be putting up our contact information at the end of this presentation, and you can directly email us and we can connect to see if what your organization's capabilities are something that might be able to help us with more broadly through the initiative.
Okay, thank you.
Erica, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question? Oh, Erica, actually, your question is similar to what Brian was asking. But if you would like to clarify, please unmute yourself and let us know your thoughts.
No, I think you answered as similar to Brian's. Yes, exactly.
Cool. Okay, Twilia, I apologize if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly, but please feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question and let us know where you're from.
Good morning, all. My name is Twyla Laster. I am the project director for Saving Our Legacy, African Americans for Smoke-Free Safe Places. My question is, will ACT work on specific health disparities? My organization is interested in building more partnerships with CBOs and youth to increase civic engagement opportunities around tobacco control policies at the local level. So I wanted to know if your project will be drilling down on that, since you're talking about civic engagement opportunities and we offer free trainings around that, and then that development can move forward into civic engagement around other things, including what it is that we do.
Sure, thanks, Twyla. That's a great question. As Flo mentioned in her presentation, we really want the areas, the specific health areas that we work on to really come from the community. So if there is a specific city that, and the youth within that city identify smoking cessation and vaping and e-cigarettes as an area that they want to address, then that would 100% be an opportunity for your organization to partner with them. But part of our design on purpose is to not be prescriptive and say, these are the things that we think you should be working on, because we as the people outside of these contexts and these communities really don't know, so I think that that's purposeful in we have those community action areas that we mentioned, but we don't really want to be specific in that way to tell folks what they should be focusing on.
Excellent, thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. Sam, please go ahead and unmute yourself and let us know, because we are in LA too. UCLA is in LA, so we should connect with you if we haven't yet. Go ahead.
Good morning. Sam G with Para Los Niños. My question was, for cities like LA, do you recommend that we actually partner with other organizations to engage city and county elected leaders?
Yeah. Sam, that's a great question. I think this applies to some of the other larger cities in California as well. For LA specifically, I would encourage you to connect with the UCLA team. We have already started organizing that because it is a larger city grouping. So we can help to coordinate that, but we would love that you're organized, that you would like to participate. So if you don't already have our contact information, if you want to send me your email through just a private message on the Zoom, I'll make sure that we connect with you.
Yes, I have some contacts with your center. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other questions? And as I've mentioned a few times, we will be putting up both a link to our website and also our email address, and Brandy will be sending out all of these documents again with a follow-up email. So in case there are more questions that come to mind after our webinar this morning, we can help you address that and dive deeper and further connect these really rich connections that we already have forming across our state. So with that, I think we can move to our next slide and question flow, which is more of a pulse check from everyone who's on our launch this morning. So you'll see a poll pop up in your Zoom. Oh, there it goes. And go ahead and click on it. These are just the different community action areas that we are highlighting as areas that we are building up additional support to help coach cities and communities with. So you'll see there's creating protective environments, promoting healthy child development, access to safe and stable housing, strengthening economic supports, public safety, youth development and civic engagement, and other. And feel free, you can vote on more than one if there are more than one areas that interest you, but we just wanted to kind of get a sense from the group of what areas you might be excited to join forces on. Okay, we're a minute in and 2/3 have voted. I think I'll give us a few more seconds, but I think we already have a good sense of where the interest lies, which is actually perfectly in line with what our group has been developing in terms of additional supports around ideas and change strategies for promoting healthy child development, creating protective environments, and youth development and civic engagement. So that's wonderful to see how similar our interests are aligned. And so before we wrap up today, we also, as we mentioned, we really want to hear from you. So one of our last thought questions that we wanted to put out for you, Flo, if you don't mind putting that slide up, is to hear about how children in your cities or communities are thriving and what challenges they might be facing and what your cities might already be doing to address these challenges. So again, as we were doing earlier with our questions, feel free to just drop the question in the chat or the comment, and I'll be happy to call on you so that you can share with the group verbally. Oh, sorry, could you not see the poll? We'll make sure that we include it at the end, but those 3 topics that I mentioned were the 3 that had the largest response. Oh, good, sorry, okay, good. And there it is, it's popped up again. So you can see about half of the folks on this launch are interested in promoting healthy child development. But yeah, we have about 10 minutes left. So if anyone feels comfortable sharing about, you know, even with all of the challenges that we painted this morning about what our families and our children and our youth are facing in this great state of California currently, there are still moments of brightness. So we would love to hear from you about how your children are thriving and what challenges they are facing and what you might already be doing. Awesome, Sam, go ahead. Let us share your comment with the group.
Oh, I think one area that we're definitely challenges around remote learning, the communities that we serve, you know, definitely the digital divide is real, not only on the devices, but just connectivity challenges, not having Wi-Fi or very limited Wi-Fi. And then you have also many of our immigrant families who are challenged with digital literacy. So I think there are a host of issues and challenges that have been amplified due to the pandemic that they've always been there, but I think it's just been really magnified.
Yeah, completely, Sam. I think Flo's Titanic analogy is apt 100% when it comes to our virtual learning and the struggles that many families are facing with being ill-equipped or also not having the knowledge and the skills to be able to navigate all of the digital divide for their families and their children. Kathleen, would you like to unmute yourself and let us know where you're from to share your comment?
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. I'm from Ventura County, California. And during this time of civil unrest and justice and the new learning platforms and isolation, I'm with the Child Abuse Prevention Council. We've been working very diligently with our Parents as Leaders programs, and our Parents as Leaders have stepped up in the community. They're critical to our community engagement, and they're like you're speaking, they're boots on the ground. They're right there and knowing what the community needs, and I just want to give them a shout out. That's a very positive difference we're making for the health and well-being of children.
That's wonderful and beautiful to hear. Thank you so much for sharing that. Are they involved with city councils, or how are they part of your organization?
So what we do here in Ventura County, just in a brief synopsis, is we're working very diligently to get our parent leaders involved in all of our larger agencies and our community-based organizations so that the parent voice is always at the table. Like Flo said earlier, we love nothing about us without us. And so we have them at our public health, behavioral health, now we're working with our ACE award. And this is the piece we like to do with the ACT of this ACT Thrive, All Children Thrive, because the parent leaders are parents in the community that come forth and have leadership skills. We train in strengthening families and the 5 protective factors, which I know many counties do. But giving those parents the voice at the table, and now looking at policies and procedures, and all coming from where it needs to come from the community itself.
That's wonderful. That's beautiful. And that's 100% what we want ACT California to be doing. So
absolutely. We're excited to even be in the conversation. So thank you.
Welcome. We're glad you're here.
Do we have any additional questions? Or additional answers to these questions? Okay, I didn't want to cut anyone off who wanted to share with us what's going on.
It's been wonderful to hear everyone's thoughts, and we appreciate your participation today.
Definitely.
Okay. Oh, Barbara, thank you for joining in. Please, if you feel comfortable, we would love to have you unmute and hear more about what you've been doing in San Jose.
I'm sorry, I joined late, so I'm worried that I missed everything important, but I just wanted to agree with what Sam just said, that all of the challenges for moving to, a remote support of families has been incredible. But the miracle has happened in San Jose in that we have been able to mobilize our promotoras to continue the programming that we were doing. It was called Safe, Secure, and Loved, in which parents learn about ACEs and learn about how to support their children and learn mindfulness and a bunch of wonderful stuff that I'm sure you all love. But they were able to do it really because the schools had taught how to get on Zoom. And that was what's so interesting. We were distraught in March, like, oh my God, we're gonna have to stop this project. And then it turned out that we just weren't giving the community enough credit. They wanted to continue this promotora-led parent education work, and they led us. And it's been really inspiring. So I'd love to share it with anybody, and I'm gonna look forward to checking more on what you did today. Thank you for letting me share.
That's beautiful. I love this, hearing about all of the magic that has happened as a result of the pandemic. I think that, as much as it's brought challenge, it's brought a lot of creativity and resourcefulness. So these are 100% things that we want to be able to capitalize and share, you know, across the state as we all work together. Yes, I see Basia has a question about data. I'm wondering if either Efren or Lila from the UCLA team would like to take that question as our final one before we wrap up for the morning.
Hello, everybody. I'm trying to see where my camera is. Yeah.
You're on.
Yeah, thanks for the question. We're going to be collecting a number of data points and helping people actually understand how to use their local data a little bit more effectively. So there is a number of efforts in that front that we'd love to share with you. So if you are welcome, you're welcome to join us in the initiative, and we will be working with you directly on how to use, take control of the narratives that your data tell about your community, as well as collecting information about the progress that you're making at a city level, as well as the progress that the initiative is making as a whole. So we have a whole evaluation and data team. Some of our members from their equity advisory group are on the call. So Drew, I saw Sam, Cantu, and Nayeli were on the call. So there's a number of folks moving in that direction. So thanks for that.
Great, everyone. Thank you so much for your questions and your participation this morning. I think it hopefully whets your appetite for more. And I'm going to turn it back over to Brandy so that she can help us wrap up our morning.
I think I'm jumping in here.
Yes, I'm going to turn it over to Flo. Thank you so much, Mimi.
Okay. So yeah, so we're really glad that everybody has been here this morning. We just want to thank you again for taking time out to learn about our initiative. Some of the key takeaways are that we'd love for you to join us. We have this really fantastic toolkit that Essentials for Childhood put together with our team. And so we're really excited about delving into it. It has some of the examples that we used about, you know, sort of what this might look like are involved there. And so we'd love to be able to talk more about what exactly it looks like to be able to join. And so we have information sessions that we are having periodically, usually about every 2 weeks. And so our next one is actually tomorrow from 12:30 to 1:30. So if you are a city that's actually interested, we will be jumping into what that means practically and a little more of the details of what exactly All Children Thrive is working on and how you can get started. So if that is you, you can get started as soon as tomorrow. If not, you know, if you need a little bit more time, we'll have another one coming up in just 2 more weeks. So please feel free, don't delay, join us in these information sessions. And there's contact information there, and we'll also be sharing this after this event this morning. And so we're really glad that you were able to join us, but we want to make sure that we give you our ask. We are really looking for cities. If I haven't said that at least 3 times before, I want to say that one more time. We are looking for cities. And so if you're interested in becoming an ACT city, or as we've talked about, community, because we certainly are willing to work with cities that are involved with their county or organized in a related fashion, please feel free to contact us. Our email address is info@act-ca.org. You can also reach us at our newly launched landing page, which is act-ca.org. And so please feel free to join us. We are really excited about that. We certainly want cities to be able to get involved. Even, I want to make sure I mention this, that even if you are not able to join us as an ACT city, maybe because your bandwidth is low, we'd still love to have you involved in our learning communities. So don't feel as if you're feeling like, you know, I'm not sure this is right for us, we'd still like to be able to have you involved in some way. So please consider joining one of our info sessions so you can think about the multiple ways to be involved in ACT CA, because this really is a better movement if more people are involved. I also want to, I'm going to stop sharing the screen momentarily. We're going to make sure we drop these links in the chat as well, so you can click on them and go right there afterward. But I just want to take a moment to really thank our teams. We have a great team at Public Health Advocates, as well as the UCLA Center for Healthier Children, Families, and Communities, as well as the California Department of Public Health, and also community partners. And then we also have some really great contractors that have worked on this with us from our Equity Advisory Group. And we have 18 members of our Equity Advisory Group that have really helped us to make sure that we are thinking about equity as we are creating this, not as an aside, but as the meat and potatoes, or I should say vegetarian option, the goal, right, of being the main entree of this work. And so I just want to recognize all of those folks, and I'm going to stop screen sharing so everybody can just kind of wave or put up the clapping emoji and let you know who they are. This is a really big initiative, and we're just so glad to be able to have all of this great brain trust and even just getting to this point of the project. And we're really looking forward to what it will look like when you're involved with us. So again, please contact us, info@act-ca.org. Please also visit our website at www.act-ca.org. And we look forward to you joining a core team and being involved with us.